I don't have any sense of nostalgia, but I thought I'd take a picture anyways. Thanks for coming, everyone. My name's Tobias, Morrison, if it matters. I've been a Mac admin on and off for about 20 years. This is my 11th year participating at this conference and my 3rd year as speaker. I'm really, really happy to be back in person. This has been my summer camp for 7 years. And I've missed everything about this conference, including the organizers, the camp counselors, and especially all of you campers. So an interesting comment was made back there, but I want to, by a show of hands, who here is already a manager? All right. So John, you want to be a manager of managers? Is that what you said? All right. Why? Well, I don't want to throw the catch box yet. How many beverages do we have? How much danger? All right. Who wants to become a manager, though? I do want to get this one out. All right. Who wants to volunteer why? You want to volunteer why? Yeah.
Because it's often easier to fix things and get things working better if you actually have the ability and the power to do it than just complaining about it.
Okay. All right. That's a good one. Back here. All right. Watch all these beverages. Oh, it's going to the wrong guy. People, I'm really tall, and people ask, "Why didn't you play basketball?" Well, you've witnessed it.
I might be an outlier, but the reason I want to get into management is because I did some mentoring, and I really, really love being able to help people grow and be able to teach them to all the things that I was like, wow, yeah, I learned that the hard way. Here, let me tell it to you so you don't have to stumble all the things over all the things that I did.
Awesome. Damien back there.
There's a long-standing joke in the IT world that we all want to retire to a log cabin in the woods with no technology around us. And moving into management is a little bit like that. You don't have to be the technical problem solver anymore. You just get to manage people instead.
All right. You and I, we're meeting on the same level there. Perfect. Yeah, if you want to send it back up. I know I'm throwing everything else out here. Here's one weird one. Who's been threatened with a promotion? All right. Not that I'm speaking from experience. All right. So as an engineer, I decided to do this talk like my other talks. I saw a challenge that I needed to address, saw this as an opportunity to build a solution to that challenge and to build a talk in one fell swoop. I am no expert at management, but I figured with the right research, time, and effort, I can come up with a great solution, help my team, and help others help their teams. What could go wrong? Well, the first risk of taking this tact is the possibility of failing at the original task. When I submitted my proposal, I was very, very excited to share the wins I stacked up by leading my team and preparing for this talk. But what happens if I fail to rack up wins? What if I fall on my face? What do I do if the whole thing goes off the rails? Now I have 2 failures to deal with. Right? I've failed to provide quality leadership, and I've got nothing to share with you guys. Got a lot of filler going on here, so I might be leading to something. I also have a distinct disadvantage when it comes to taking on challenges like this. My brain is an active participant in counteroffensive measures against my success. When I was getting ready, it kind of went like this. I got it. I'm in. I've got this talk now. I'm going to get started right away. So I sit down and I write an outline. I decide on what research I'm going to do. I read quarter and a half of a bunch of books, some blog posts, listen to some podcasts. I write a paragraph or 2. I go over and start playing on Instagram and lose a couple of days over there. I reread what I've written. I decide it's all trash and throw it away. Sit down again, start writing, write a bunch of actual trash, start to panic, spend several hours trying to learn how to solve a Rubik's Cube, which, if you can see, I came really close. I stare at my screen for hours expecting more inspiration. I receive none. Change my story direction, expecting inspiration, receive none. jump on the PSU speakers channel and see everyone posting that they've got 125 slides ready, when I haven't even opened up Keynote yet. And then I go into a full meltdown. So the goal was to avoid a meltdown. Sometimes I don't win that battle, but that's what medication is for. As I said, I am no management expert, but I do have a lot of experience. That is to say, I've held a number of jobs with titles like assistant store manager, business manager, whatever that means, client experience manager, service desk manager, Apple device manager. My first management experiences were in retail, but our industry, engineering management, is nothing like retail. In retail, you've got a hierarchy of people above you. They're making all the plans. Store managers get a playbook. You've got people to call when something breaks. You've got planograms to tell you where the stuff goes out on the show floor. You get a new display. There's instructions that tell you exactly how to hang it up. Very IKEA-like. There's no collaborating. There's no teammates to break down work. There's really nothing to get in the way of being basically successful with almost no skill set whatsoever. So, retail manager qualifications: have a good credit score. They don't want you to steal from them. Be trustworthy enough to lock the doors at the end of the night, and be able to take abuse on the sales floor without crying. Fast forward a decade, and I'm managing the service desk at an MSP. Service desk, there's instructions out there. There's ways to get it figured out. Qualifications: be a good troubleshooter, understand KPIs and escalation paths, be able to take abuse on the phone without crying. Fast forward another decade, I'm called on to lead a team of endpoint engineers at a large enterprise. Qualifications for an endpoint manager? I'll maybe get back to you about that. There are, however, two common elements to all areas of management: people and uncertainty. To succeed as a manager, you need to have the constitution to deal with both of these things. People we deal with regularly are going to be leadership team above you, your supervisor, management peers, direct reports below you, and the larger direct team, plus customers, end users, product managers, on and on. Uncertainty will hit you from all angles. Course changes from management, misunderstandings from associates, software conflicts, employees' personal lives, vendor failures, the aforementioned coffee meets laptop, and of course, Apple. Always throwing us curveballs and surprises. Uncertainty from Apple for certain. So, sharing time. I'm going to take a moment to open up and talk about some of my mistakes. When I stumbled into my latest role, I was full of ambition. I was determined to show my value as fast as possible and excited to enact positive change. I looked around to identify what I thought was broken. I was going to prove my worth and make my mark. I started reorganizing documentation and formulating ways to make improvements because I know how to write great documentation. While attending meetings, I started to categorize teammates into thinkers, doers, bystanders, making little boxes. I started formulating what I could do to add efficiency and improve communications because I knew how to run great meetings. I focused on things that I felt were my strengths and what I considered the low-hanging fruit for effecting change. I was going to prove my worth and make my mark. The truth was, I was just dragging all my baggage in a team that already had plenty of their own. The problem was I made it about me. I worked on a distributed team before the pandemic. Do we know the term distributed team? It's the base camp guys call it distributed team. Just basically, we don't go into an office, right? I mean, meet up on video chat and such. We started out in an office. I started not showing up to the office, and then other people started not showing up into the office, and then we became a distributed team. I even made work from anywhere a central tenet of the consulting firm that I worked for. I was very happy to pat myself on the back when the pandemic hit, and every company was going into scramble mode to spin up solutions to accommodate remote work. And we'd already solved that problem long before it was necessary. This team had a good thing going. We were a small team that had an honest culture. And we generally agreed about what our work was, how we divided things up, and we were very team-oriented and helped each other out a lot. Real easy to do in a little tiny team. Most of our meetings were on Zoom. We did actually have Zoom before the pandemic. I thought it was weird at first, but turned out to be a pretty good tool. And we followed all the rules of cameras on, and no distractions. You know, everyone was focused and engaged in all the meetings. I joined a new team that did not share this culture. Their organization was one of the scramblers. They were not prepared to have employees off the LAN, and they did not have the infrastructure to support thousands of simultaneous 1080p video conferences. They were actually trained to keep their cameras off to assure meetings didn't flame out under the weight of all those video streams. I sauntered into that situation completely ignorant of all of this, and I happily had my camera on. Was a little confused why everyone was sitting in the dark. As I slowly acclimated to the new team, I began requesting that people turn their cameras on. Then I started bribing people and eventually begging some of those people to help me out and turn their cameras on. I had a good week or so where almost half of the team turned their cameras on. But ultimately, a week or so later, it ended up being a total failure. This team had established a culture around cameras, no cameras. One reinforced and enabled by their management, and they were anti-camera, and I just didn't understand because I didn't ask. First time I was elevated into a management position from an engineering role, I treated it like a bolt-on to my current position. I just figured I'd mash in some managing in between meetings and deployments and coding and reprovisioning and changing MDMs and all the other things that was occupying 120% of my time. Besides, who else was going to do all the work that I was already doing? Well, it turned out it wasn't going to be me because I began sinking. I had greatly underestimated what I had committed to. At first, I was just a terrible manager. I didn't take the time to check in with my team regularly and support them. I didn't have time to manage team projects. And I didn't have time to do my regular work. I did it because I didn't think I had any options. We were a small company, and there just weren't enough people to fill all the roles necessary to run that small business. Everyone wore multiple hats, as we like to say. We were in growth mode. We added several help desk staff. That, of course, in addition to needing to do intake with them, train them, we had to develop standards. We had to write documentation. We had to create escalation procedures. We also decided to integrate a new ticketing system at that time because, you know, all that free time we had laying around. At no point did I pause for a moment and say, hey, I might need some relief here. So the obvious occurred. My output declined in both quantity and quality. Worse, I was an ineffectual leader. I didn't have the time to dedicate to meeting with and supporting the staff. I had to scramble to deliver changes. I was slow to respond to escalated tickets, and I definitely didn't have time to dedicate to personal development or growth. That happened to be the year that High Sierra brought a whole bunch of changes to the OS, but more specifically to the MDM side of things. And I missed the beta period. And of course, I had a number of clients who were like, oh, new OS, new computers, let's get them in there. And things didn't go well at all. So things were broken, caused a lot of rework. My support staff ended up having to cover my butt for me. I did a great disservice to myself and to that team. First thing I heard from my new team, the team I'm in now, is that there are entirely too many meetings. No one can get anything done because there's no time left to focus on engineering. I thought to myself, this is great. All I have to do is figure out all the meetings, what all the meetings are, break them up into levels of importance, and let people off the hook for those meetings that weren't important, or what I determined weren't important for them. I figured the most obvious thing would be to get the most important engineers out of as many meetings as possible so they could maximize their focus time. It took about a month for me to figure out that I screwed up really badly. Those really important engineers that I thought I was protecting, they were suddenly really upset that they weren't invited to all the meetings. How are they supposed to know about all the things happening if they weren't in all the meetings? But it wasn't just those people. Everyone started asking me about the meetings that were no longer on their calendars. Why were they being excluded? What did they do wrong? Did I forget to send them an invite? Sure. Suddenly I was receiving Outlook messages that my meetings were being forwarded to people. You know, those people that I had so generously gotten off the hook. I found myself having very awkward conversations about why I wasn't inviting them. Very awkward conversations. I was engaging the team and I was asking questions, but I was leading conversations. In organizations, culture and practices are reinforced and enabled by management. I didn't understand this. I certainly didn't understand this culture at this new gig because I wasn't listening. I was facing a cold dose of reality. Whatever I thought about my abilities, the assumptions I made about leadership, they weren't working here. What worked in small business just didn't cut it in the enterprise. The success I had in developing culture from the ground up by being employee number 2 didn't translate into stepping into a team that had years of existing, developed, and deeply ingrained culture. They weren't going to shift gears right away just because I came in. I was an unknown quantity. My culture had very little overlap with their own experience. It was time to take a hard look at my failures and reassess my strategies. Hamilton fans? Listening is a skill you need to develop and nurture. A good first step is to stop talking, which I kind of wish I could do right now. This one's tough for me because I don't handle silence well. I need constant stimulation, and I'm never at a loss for words. When I heard team members complaining about meetings, it seemed so obvious to me what the answer was: get them out of meetings. It's a common trope that meetings suck. There's a book called Meetings Suck. It's a good book. I recommend it if you haven't read it. Meetings are a place for people to feel important by talking at people rather than engaging in conversation. They get dragged out way past their scheduled end times. Sometimes they devolve into headbutting sessions with people scrambling to get their ideas passed at all costs. By far the worst, at least for me, they go quiet. There's no shortage of advice on hosting great meetings, but there is no panacea. In one organization I was in, we had very specific agendas. Those agendas had time blocks. We had a timekeeper who kept us on schedule, gave us warnings so that we knew what was happening. We never ended a meeting late. At my current organization, a loose agenda is really all we need, and an effective ending time. And we even allow for extending the meeting time when the host asks for permission and everyone agrees. Some people can bow out at that point as well. Otherwise, we've found our communication rhythm and flow. My cardinal sin here at this place was excluding people. People said, there are too many meetings. What I heard is, I'm in too many meetings. It's a fine distinction, but the team wasn't telling me that they wanted to, or they didn't want to attend these meetings. No one asked me to protect their time or exclude them. So I had to admit defeat on my first easy win. I rolled back my changes and returned to the drawing board. I invited everybody to all the meetings again. I took the hit. I smiled. I started listening. I discovered better ways of handling internal meetings and even started joining a few new meetings myself. I created criteria for individuals to help them make their own decisions about what were the right meetings to attend. I stepped out of managing other people's meetings for them and started leading people toward making the right decisions for themselves. When I asked my team to turn their cameras on, I was really surprised by the backlash. I've read the literature. This is how you hold meetings. Remove distractions. Turn on the cameras. Test your mics. Put up a corporate virtual background. Keep the engagement high. This is how you run successful distributed meetings. Just turn your cameras on. Cameras on does have its advantages. It can provide an additional layer of bandwidth for communication. If you're selling products or ideas, having people see your face can enable trust. If you're selling, by seeing your facial expressions, you can avoid people misinterpreting your tone. But all things are not equal, and not all people derive the same benefits from technology. What I didn't see were the obstacles. This team was established. They entered the world of distributed work using video conferencing basically as glorified conference calls. They didn't even have the tools to support effective video meetings. They didn't have workspaces to accommodate being on camera. The software they used did not effectively support virtual backgrounds. As I mentioned before, they didn't really have the bandwidth. They were afraid that the meeting would crash at any given time. They didn't have external cameras, but they did have external monitors. So their attention was focused on their external monitor. So they were essentially given the side eye to everyone in their meeting. They weren't engaged. They weren't set up to create that engagement. There are additional obstacles to consider when thinking about that cameras on mentality. Some people just aren't comfortable being on camera. It's not a direct stand-in for in-person meetings. And when you insist on people working from home be on camera, you're essentially forcing your way into their personal and private space. Not everyone has a TV studio in their home, and most of us aren't comfortable on camera. I was working from my bedroom. I didn't need people to see my bed. And if the virtual background wasn't working, it wasn't going to work for me either, but moved around. Research also shows that video exhausts the mind and body a lot faster than in-person meetings or even phone calls. Remember, this team was already struggling with too many meetings. Adding that additional stressor wasn't going to help anyone. You can't take a leadership role and expect to continue delivering the same output that you did before taking the role. Damien actually kind of was getting towards this, and potentially is a good thing. In fact, it's best to completely reevaluate what output looks like in your new role. Common mistake new managers make is holding on to the idea of continuing to do the work you were doing as an engineer. I still struggle with making this mistake. I tend to work in lean crews with lots to accomplish, and I always let that feeling of there's so much to do guide me into thinking that I need to be a direct participant in creating that output. I also have kept tasks for myself because I feel they're difficult, thankless tasks, and no one wants to take them on, so okay, I'll just do that. Don't you guys worry about it. Beyond crappy tasks and full backlogs, there are more nefarious ways to convince yourself to stay in the trenches. You might feel like you're the most capable person to complete the task, or that the only way to assure it's done right is to do it yourself. This line of thinking is deeply insulting to your team and undermines both you, your team, and your leadership status. Delegating tasks pays dividends. By delegating work, you're reinforcing the fact that your team members are essential and you trust their judgment. You're giving them the opportunity to do great work, to learn and grow, to succeed. It's a fine art that requires you to do less. Don't dictate work. Allow your people to be involved in choosing the work and defining and how they achieve those goals. Your job is to provide a clear vision of the expected outcomes so that there is clarity and understanding of the goals and the timelines. Sometimes I ask myself, how did I get here? There's a reason managers are often external hires. The skill sets of engineers and managers have very little overlap. If you're lucky, you served under some strong leaders. If you're good, you were paying attention while they were leading. As an engineer, you've spent years rising through the ranks. You don't want to flame out at this crucial step. If you're in the right organization, they'll invest in your success and help you rise to the challenge. But you'll need more than that to succeed. You'll need patience, a desire to learn new skills, and a willingness to give up your preconceived notions and start over. Crucially, you'll also need the support of your former coworkers, now your subordinates, to help you through. It's at this moment that you might recall the times at the water cooler when you were talking about how your boss was clueless and inflexible and generally in over their head. You might also come to the realization that those conversations might still be happening, but now you're the boss. As a manager, you're going to face a whole new set of problems. Your performance is no longer going to be judged by your personal successes, but by the successes of your team. You'll need to rein in the desire to fix problems yourself that are the responsibility of someone else under you. You'll have to accept that sooner or later, your skills will be outstripped by one or all of your team members. You need to expand your sphere of influence. Specifically, you need to develop relationships with other managers in your organization to assure you are getting the right information and delivering the right products to the right people. Getting on the phone, meeting people, things engineers don't like. You also need to learn how to say no. So I asked you guys who wanted to go into management, and I got some unexpected responses, but that's great. Thankfully, I got some really, really good ones. One that I didn't hear, but I have heard in the past is you're a highly motivated person, and your primary reason is continued growth. I happen to be that guy. You keep needing to rise and challenge yourself and generally getting more. At some point, engineers will hit a ceiling where there's nowhere to go but into management, unless you are Beth, who I met earlier, who said she didn't have any career ambitions. So she said no to management, which is great. She was honest. As companies like Microsoft have found, elevating engineers to management is not always a winning strategy. Elevating engineers to management is fraught for both the employee and the organization. There's a high probability that the ascent to management will land you right into the top tier of the Peter Principle. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the Peter Principle states that a person who is competent at their job will be promoted until they reach a level of incompetence, at which point they will not be promoted again. Once you end up here, you're in a seriously bad place. If you're lucky, you'll be let go or be demoted, because otherwise you'll be stuck with a role you can't handle and make you seriously reconsider your choices. It's likely to make your career a daily trial. An organization's risks are obvious. They don't want to put untested people into positions where they can create problems, and generally don't invest in the training necessary to create leadership skills in their existing people. Consider this conference. Your company sent you here because they're investing in your hard skills. They want you to get better at your job. They're probably buying you Udemy or Lynda courses, or sending you off to get training and certification. They're unlikely to offer similar opportunities to be a better leader. Best case, they'll continue to send you to engineering conferences, especially if you offer to do a talk. Humans throughout history have engaged in seeking goals that are both ill-advised and well beyond their abilities. Thousands of people every year seek out to scale Mount Everest. But as the saying goes, Everest is littered with the bodies of highly motivated people. Being highly motivated is a poor indicator of your ability to be a successful leader. Promotions are also a good motivator and a good way to get a pay rise. But so is finding a new job. In fact, a majority of professionals can find better pay in the same position simply by moving to another company. Money, poor motivation for seeking a leadership position, and the grass isn't always greener on the other side of the fence. Similarly, if your desire is to manage others or be the boss, you might want to reconsider. Great leaders are not forged by a desire for power. People who wield power for power's sake make poor leaders. Great leaders put those in their charge before themselves. As an engineer, very few of the skills that I learned as a Mac admin are applicable to leading a team. There's no bash script to resolve the conflict between Frankie and Sasha or explain to your manager why you missed a ship date. You're going to have to do things that make you uncomfortable. Provide negative feedback, again, telling people no. Have regular conversations with people you just don't want to have conversations with. Seek out partnerships with strangers. Things that don't often come naturally to our ilk. Developing positive relationships within your team and with people externally can make things a lot easier on both you and your people. Now, I drew you into this talk by putting manager into the title, but you might have noticed how little respect I've given to the term. And if you were looking at the first slide, you might also have noticed that manager isn't in my title presently. I lead a team of exceptionally talented engineers. The title of manager conveys meaning when prefaced with terms like project, store, device. I can manage a project by exerting control over various aspects of it. I can manage devices by sending MDM commands to them. I can manage to make it through another day without quitting in a rage. When applied to people, manage can be a dangerous word. People are complex and generally unwilling to be managed like a project or an iPhone. People can, however, align behind a leader. And being a good leader should be the goal of anyone seeking a management position. Now, I'm not trying to make a pedantic argument here, but a distinction. Your goal is to manage, if your goal is to manage people, again, I kindly suggest you give it another think. Think for a moment about how people talk about managers. My manager made me do this terrible task. My manager is forcing me into taking the worst shift. I can't stand being micromanaged. Great leaders recognize this truth. The people you lead don't work for you, you work for them. There are many styles of leadership, from democratic to autocratic. If your goal is to become CTO, this might not be the talk for you. I know you guys are managers that are looking to manage up, but you know, if your goal is CTO, let me get you a copy of my CV before you leave. I'm talking about your very next career step, leading a small team, a middle management position where you're taking directives from above and filtering it down to a small team of professionals. There's no space here to be a visionary or transformational leader, not at this level. That's for managers of the managers of the managers. Servant leadership works well at all levels of management, but especially at the small team level. Your job is to take the specifications from the customer and bring them to the engineers. Provide them with context and clarity so that they can do their best work. Servant leadership is a concept that was introduced in the 70s. The concept is fairly simple. Make it a priority to serve rather than to lead. At our level, our contemporaries are generally educated professionals. Most Mac admins have degrees, usually in the liberal and arts and the humanities, but I know a couple of you at least that have computer science degrees. They understand team projects, personal organization, and deadlines and have the paper to prove it. They don't need someone to hover over their shoulder and explain the finer details of property lists. They need someone to support them, someone who protects them from the ever-changing whims of upper management, and someone who can clear the way for them to deliver great work. First thing you can do to make your job easier is to empower your team to make good decisions. Again, we have a distinct advantage over many managers that our teams are full of talented, highly educated people. Unlike a manager at a fast food restaurant, we don't have to teach members how to run a register or mop a bathroom. We can deal in generalities. We need to make sure File Vault is enabled. We need to make sure that file sharing over Bluetooth is disabled. We know there are many ways to attack most of these tasks, but we don't need to dictate the details of every job. Set your team free and enable them to make decisions based on their knowledge of the problem and the restrictions of your environment. This gives your team a sense of ownership over their tasks and platform and frees you to address other challenges. If you're concerned that your team might make the wrong decisions because the environment is challenging, or only you or some senior member of your team knows the right way to do things, well, you now have an outlet for that newfound free time, setting standards. You just discovered that you or someone on your team is hoarding knowledge, and you need to free that knowledge to enable your team to do their best work. Document your standards. Document the challenges within the environment. Then host lunch and learns. Share that knowledge with your team. We had a real powerful saying at one of my offices that I love to this day. Slow down, get more done. Within the startup community, there's been for years a culture of the grind. Fabled stories of employees working 80 hours a week, sleeping under their desks, living on energy drinks. What we don't often hear about are the burnout, the animosity, the regret. Luckily, we have science. We may disagree about the value of the grind, but research shows that overwork is counterproductive. We are engaged in what I like to call thinky work. Thinky work is strenuous. Research shows that there are limits to our ability to make good choices and be productive. As we exceed our thresholds, we get sloppy. Sloppiness requires rework. That creates an environment where we are working longer to fix mistakes we made by working too long, and on and on. Every one of us is unique, and we all have our different thresholds and limits, but asking more of employees than what is reasonable is bad for the employee, bad for productivity, and bad for your relationships. Sure, people can do all kinds of amazing things. I have a friend who's an ultramarathon runner, but he'll never convince me that it's a good thing or something that I can do, and I certainly can't afford his hospital bills. But it's not just asking people to stay late. It's about setting an example. You set the tone for your team. If they see you in the office after 6 or responding to emails at 9 at night, you're setting the tone that this is the way your team operates. You can't combat this with explanations or excuses. It'll get into people's heads because they're looking at your behavior to know what is acceptable and expected. Clock out at 5, and don't try to be sneaky about it. I keep looking up there as if there's not a confidence monitor here. Your commitment to your team should be guided by a desire to raise up each individual. Ask for opinions, let others make decisions, and celebrate every win. But also be prepared to bear the weight of bad outcomes. Letting others make mistakes doesn't free you from the consequences of bad decisions or missed deadlines. If Charlie makes a bad call that you enabled, you still have to take the hit. Great leaders don't point fingers. If you want to continue to be respected, you take responsibility, shake off the dust, do the damage control, and then address the conditions that led to the problem. I do understand the potential for the confusion on this point. I just told you to loosen your grip and let your team make decisions. Now I'm telling you to take responsibility for every bad thing that they do. But if it's a decision that falls under your charge, then it is your responsibility. This is where we get micromanagers. People who are so sure that they are the only ones who can make the right decision that not even Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson can wrest a decision from them. But this only presents as a lack of confidence in your team and results in low productivity, general mistrust among the team, and general resentment of that manager. When I encourage you to empower your team, I'm not suggesting that you set them out to pasture and wish them the best. You need to be there for them, to provide a guiding hand, keep them on track, and make sure that they're making choices that serve the greater good, not just their own needs. You need to be aware of what decisions they're making and be prepared to course correct the moment you see a problem. The best way to do this is by fostering open communication between you and your team. I have 2 strategies for staying on top of what is happening within my team: daily stand-ups and one-to-one meetings. Daily stand-ups is the team's opportunity for everyone to get together and share their daily goals. Here we gain insight into what everyone will be focusing on today, but it's also an opportunity for teammates to ask questions to the group, make connections for collaboration, and discover potential overlaps or issues that were overlooked during the planning stages. It's my time to take the temperature in the room and keep up with all the moving parts, and I let my spidey sense warn me of potential problems. One-to-one meetings are my time to get a better understanding of individuals. If you've never run a one-to-one meeting, you might struggle to find your legs and even question the value of these meetings. Keep at it. Experience will make you better, but it will also help you realize the value that you've been getting from those meetings since the first meeting you had. I found a number of agendas for leading one-to-one meetings, which seems like an obvious choice, right? Great meetings have an agenda. Let me discourage you from bringing an agenda to your one-to-one meetings. One-to-ones are for the employee. The only structure you should bring is a regular schedule and your attention. This is a time for rapport building, for showing employees you care, and building trust between you. At first, things may go slow. If neither of you have any experience with one-to-ones, you'll have to learn together, but that can be to your advantage as well. As to what you get out of these meetings, as trust is built between you and your reports, you'll begin to hear real feedback. You'll gain insights about the team as a whole. You'll start to understand personality conflicts or issues with working conditions that you wouldn't otherwise hear in group settings. And it's another chance to engage your spidey sense and discover problems before they become problems. I used to keep notes during one-to-ones, but I've given that up. Found it was too distracting. I wasn't focusing on my employees. I dispense with the agenda. You should be engaging and not only on a business level, but on a personal level as well. There should be no distractions. This is time to get to know each other. That'll help you build strong relationships. Though I do discourage taking notes, I do encourage you to bring a notebook with you and really carry a notebook with you at all times. You don't need to furiously scribble down all your grievances or D&D tips, but you should collect follow-ups that result from the conversation. Follow-through is extremely important in building that trust relationship. You must be delivering on your problems, no matter what. So get that notebook, write everything down that seems remotely important. At the end of your day, review your notes and prepare your next steps. There's 100 styles like getting things done or bullet journaling and 1,000 tools to organize your work. I'm not here to advocate for any method or tool. We all have our quirks and preferences. So you do you. But it is important to capture commitments you make so they are always keeping those promises and keeping up that bond of trust. It's like it says here on my field notebooks. I'm not writing it down to remember it later. I'm writing it down to remember it now. This note-taking mindset will set you up for success in what is perhaps your most important task as a manager, following through on your commitments. Getting a pattern here? Yes, it's important to follow through on your deliverables to management, but that's just a mark on a spreadsheet. You're working with people. People are putting their trust in you. If you let an email from an outsider slip down the inbox black hole, you can ask for forgiveness. But your job is serving those teammates, so don't take a chance that a bad meeting for you late in the day will lead you to forgetting to save a piece of cake for Milton. You have to care about your team and show it by following through on your commitments. Otherwise, Milton might burn the building down. Nothing makes a leader seem more unapproachable than appearing to be busy all the time. Well, maybe a closed door or if you yell a lot. But you guys have hung in this long, so I think you're going to do okay. Appearing frazzled is a sure way to make sure everyone around you is frazzled. It's contagious. It rubs off, just like working late. If you appear constantly overworked, your team will take your lead and begin overcommitting and stretching themselves thin. Sometimes you have to protect your team from you. Consider strategies that will make you available when you are needed. Work toward having predictable availability. Make sure your one-to-ones are recurring in the same day and the same time, and be early. Give yourself lots of buffers so you're early to every meeting, and every time you enter the room or video chat, you're prepared, you appear calm, and you're ready to listen. And smile, because those are contagious too. At my principal employer, Taman, our mission statement is well-supported people support people well. This rang really true to me when I came into the organization. By being a supportive leader, you free your team to do their best work. You guide them by making great decisions. You guide them to making great decisions, producing great outcomes, and generally kicking butt. Good engineers have no problem creating solutions in the vacuum, but in the complex world of humans and emotions and hierarchies and security teams and risk management and stakeholders and org charts, going it alone is a fool's errand and ends in bruised egos, animosity, and sometimes even burnout. When you seek to serve others, you clear barriers, get answers, and provide the means necessary for not only your survival, but for a thriving culture. If you seek a leadership role, make it your goal to build a foundation on which your team can erect a platform that serves thousands of people and supports the work and mission of your company. Seek to always support your people well. Q&A. Who wants me to throw this thing at them? Yes, sir. You've got a cap on that. That's good. You saw how bad I was at it. Oh, not bad.
Excuse me. For anyone who's, I guess, previously your position, a tech person, an engineer, and there is no, I guess, management trainee program, what would be what would be your blueprint, your 5-step whatever, in order for them to say, hey, I'll be a qualified a manager in case the position ever opens, or if upper management says, oh, I see something in him, let's promote this individual?
You know what? I don't have a 5-step program.
It can be 4.
Yeah. I'm actually going to do 3 after the Q&A is over.
3 is fine.
So I will give you 3 of those. But also there's a lot of resources out there. I've been keeping an eye on things for a long time. So a couple of things that I might recommend to you is there's a gentleman named Michael Lopp that some of you might have heard of before. He worked at Apple and a whole bunch of Silicon Valley places. He runs a website called Rands and Repose. He also has a leadership Slack that you can join. And I think he does a podcast now as well. And he's got 2 great books that are out. First one was Managing Humans, which is great. And then he's got a follow-up, and the name escapes me, even though I just read half of it. That was one of the examples. But Michael Lopp, L-O-P-P, he's a great one there. Beyond that, again, that's where I was kind of struggling in this realm, is that, there's not a lot necessarily out there or offered, at least within within our realm. There's certainly MBA programs, and you can learn how to, do Excel spreadsheets. But proving that you're able to make good decisions and create, say, great documentation, because it's not those engineering skills, it's not those hard skills that are going to identify you as leadership material. It's getting in there and helping others, spreading yourself out and offering a hand and just jumping in. Kind of half of the reason that I got into this position where I was I ended up on meetings that were going really quiet, and I said I couldn't help myself, right? And I just started yammering. That yammering ended up being semi-useful to the people around me, and they sort of elevated me up. All right, I can stop talking. It happens. Other questions? All right. Oh, yeah, by the way. Do a Rubik's Cube. Thank you very much. Does that motivate anyone for a question? Not that I want more questions. Oh!
Not that I need the Rubik's Cube, but I'll take it, sure. What if you find yourself in a position where you are in a new company? I'm not saying this is
like
me.
A startup?
No, not a startup,
okay.
per se. But where you see some deficiencies in your current manager, that you've brought some really valid points that this person might lack.
In that case, a thing that I engaged in, and you can find resources on, is a concept called managing up. So, look it up, managing up. There's lots of guidance that way as well. You don't want to start stepping on toes, and you don't want to make it obvious, right? But there are techniques in which you can suggest a good idea and say, oh, hey, you know what? I thought of a great approach to this particular thing, and I wondered if something like that. But managing up is something I definitely suggest taking a look into. Cool. Anyone else?
Yeah. Oh, that's far.
Unfortunately, not loud enough for the video, and that's what they need it for.
Later. All right, there we go. I was curious about two things. In my head, they're related, but I'm not entirely sure that they'll come out that way. You emphasized a lot about, supporting the team. The team is first. You're there to remove those sort of obstacles. I'd like maybe one or two concrete examples of something of that. And secondly, I really like that you explained the why behind the lack of webcam and that kind of aspect of culture. Mm-hmm. But as a leader, how do you foment good culture, especially if there's value that you're bringing or that you feel you could bring to a team that's already established, that has already developed some habits and are maybe good enough?
Yeah. Wow, the first one, right? Oh, so clearing obstacles. So one good example of clearing obstacles. So we have a migration project that's going on right now, and we actually need to get back-end services off of Mac infrastructure and into Windows infrastructure. There's other teams that are involved there. No one really knows who those teams are and how to engage them. So I just start picking up the phone and calling anyone that I can and just say, hi, I don't know anything, tell me something. So then I start moving through the hierarchy and eventually find someone that's semi-useful and then get that information over to the, in this case, it was a perfect example of that engineer who just wasn't going to do that. That's not their skill set. They don't want to call a bunch of people they don't know. So those are the kinds of sacrifices, because I'm not big on calling people either, but I just play a little dumb there. And then for the meeting part of it, I turn my camera on. every meeting that I lead, because I do follow that culture a little bit too. So when I'm invited to meetings, I often will leave my camera off. Every meeting that I lead, I still have that camera on. I engage that camera. In fact, I just got a comment from one of the guys. They're like, "You're really committing to that camera." And I'm like, "You're damn straight I am. I'm looking right in there. I'm smiling. I'm being goofy. I'm saying stupid things. I'm keeping things light so that we're moving things along." So that's my technique. Yes, Damien.
In your experience as a manager, do you find that sometimes your management style has to change, conditional based on the people that are in the group you're managing? For instance, managing a group of 22-year-olds is very different from managing a group of people who are 40 or 50 or older. Can you have any stories you can tell about that, where you've had to change your management style or your management approach, conditionally based on who you're managing?
Actually, when I was on a very undiverse team, and that team started becoming diverse, that ended up being a challenge. So instead of staring into the faces of a bunch of white guys, right? Suddenly there were like women on the team, and so there were some conversational styles that needed to change. Also, as I got old, the youngsters, I have to say, "Oh, you slayed." Yeah, but otherwise, I just, I've committed to this idea of, dad jokes and old man self-deprecation, and it seems to spread itself out across a wide variety of people.
Would you say that, similarly, you may have to vary your management style if you're working with other cultures, people from other cultures? My own situation is I often work with people in the Asia region, and they have a very different culture and a very different approach. And I'm finding that even just working with them on a team, I have to change my approach to how I interact with them.
Yeah, in that case, I actually try to team up with members of my team who can help me understand that better, and he's laughing right behind you. But for the most part, I'm just I just trying to remember that I need to make those meetings very early in the morning, because otherwise they're not going to be around. Otherwise, I would say that I haven't necessarily considered that as part of my management journey, but more of my, how do I say this properly? My awakening journey, right? Just kind of, in general, we know that things are changing in the culture at large. Inclusivity is very, very important. I've just been lucky that I have a lot of resources available to me, including like at my kids' schools, they have a real big DEI-J program, and I've actually gone to some trainings, what do they call them? Affinity groups, and joined in affinity groups and done some book club stuff like that. I think that in general in your life you should strive to understand other people and other cultures, as much as possible. And to that point, it's been great coming to this for 11 years and seeing it go from a very small group of guys who look just like me, to a much more inclusive group, and it's been a really exciting experience in that sense. There's more all of a sudden. All right, the only thing I have left, other than the two for these guys, is an online resale shop sent me a tube of thermal paste. So if anyone wants some thermal paste. What flavor? Good job. MX4 Arctic. It's Arctic flavored. John.
Yes. So I'm a new manager. And
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Or I'm sorry.
Or sorry, yeah. I'm following a similar thing. I've been an engineer for 12, 13 years or something like that. And I've found it difficult a little bit to. So as an engineer who reports to people that might not have been engineering managers, they might have just been managers, people managers.
Yep.
I find it difficult to sometimes, or even maybe it is a question I'd like that how would you do this? to protect the people that report to me, you know, because I know the shoes that they're in. I know that engineering is not, you know, it can be very difficult to plan timing, right, perfectly, especially when you're working with 6 different teams or something like that. And I feel, you know, I have an engineer that, you know, he does good work, but because of other groups or because the project might be taking left turns in different places, he's, I wouldn't say falling behind, but the project has slipped many, many, many times because of it. And I have to report that up to other management who, again, you know, and I try to report it as it's, you know, he's doing his work, but this X, Y, Z happened. I guess the question is, how do you work with, or how can you protect your, you know, your team when they're doing their work, but something's just not right, and maybe the managers that you might have to report to for yourself don't understand it because they weren't engineers.
Sure. First off, how often do you have one-to-ones with this guy?
So I literally just became a manager maybe 2 months ago, so I've had one.
Okay.
But I have a monthly cadence set up. I just had to stick one.
You might want to consider increasing it.
Yeah.
Right. So not in a, you know, I'm going to be on top of you all the time, but a hey, you know, tell me what's going on. What are the challenges? And you know, try to see what kind of relief that you can get to him to address the problem instead of having to, because I think that you're asking, like, how do I explain to manager? There's kind of 2 problems here, right? So one is, how do we get him where he needs to be, you know, which is creating that relationship, narrowing in on the problem, and then maybe seeing if there are other resources to improve that. Because I've run into this before where they're like, well, you know, I can't move forward on this thing because you know, Stephanie on the AAA team isn't getting back to me, right? You know, at that point, that's when you start sending messages to Stephanie directly, and then you send the next message to Stephanie and her superior, right? And you expand that sphere of influence so that things come together better there. On the other side, you're engaging with those other managers. I ended up with a set of skills by selling computers for a fruit company and learning how to break down technical complexities into human speak, right? So try to think about, because it's real easy to fall into excuse making, right? Well, you know, Stephanie just won't get back to us, so we just can't clear this obstacle. Because your manager's only response to that is, well,
did you reach out to Stephanie?
Yeah, what's going on with Stephanie, and what have you done to get Stephanie to respond and to get this problem done? And that's, you know, that's where you're going to the person who's fixing their problem, right? And saying, hey, your person is creating this problem for me. What are you going to do for me?
That makes sense.
Cool. There were more?
First of all, I would like to thank you for a great presentation and all the resources that you provided for us and all the good questions that came before me. Mine might not be relevant to a lot of the managers or managers of managers that are already in this room, but for somebody who's not a manager, say who wants to become a manager, like you said, a lot of companies will not promote from within for said reasons already. And then for manager positions that open up in other places, even if it's an entry-level manager position, the requirements are 2-3 years of management experience. How do you get over that hurdle?
Yeah. I mean, that's a classic career question, right? You know, how do I get experience when every job requires experience? Again, do the personal development, you know, read the books, get involved, you start to understand leadership cultures, work on managing up, work on showing that you have, you know, a certain set of skills that make it obvious. put your resume out everywhere you can. Don't be discouraged by the fact that they have unreasonable expectations on there. I've never not put in a job application because they said they wanted something I didn't have. I've gotten hired into shops that were like JAMP certification, #1 thing. And then, okay, I've got the 100. You got the job. Did it? Yeah.
That's a good way to put it, but just a follow-up, how do you document some of these things? Because like they're like, well, you need to have 2 or 3 years of management experience. But even if you do the things that you said and follow the things that you say, it's still not management experience in their eyes, because you haven't managed people. How do you document that you've actually improved yourself as a person or as a human, that you have some of those skills? What is a good way to document it? This may not really be
Yeah,
question.
I think you got me stumped on this one, honestly, because because I had manager on my resume, because I had a dumb manager position by running a big box guitar store. That in itself was enough. So, and I don't know that I would necessarily recommend that you go out and start managing a guitar center necessarily, but yeah, I don't know. Does anyone else here have? He's got one. No? Oh, you've got a question. Do you have an answer to it? Yeah, Enrique, can you get the box over to him? Watch your laptops. All right.
I've actually got 2 things to do. One of the organizations, though, the organization I'm in now, they do rotations where it's a 6-month time. You are an assistant to someone, so you kind of dip your toes in the water, get some things, see how people are doing things. And that is one way you can start getting that actual experience within your organization. Another thing you can do is ask for an intern. Because now you are actually managing somebody.
Yeah, and I thought of another thing, depending on who's above you, you might find that you have an opportunity to enable them in a certain way and help them get over some certain challenges, establishing good relationships. Some people get jobs by submitting a resume to some company, but most people get jobs by the people that they know, right? And if you can create great relationships internally, and people, when something comes up, and your manager's like, oh, you know what? He cleared all of these obstacles for it. He's got a real good chance. You should consider him.
One thing.
And I think Enrique would. Oh, did you?
Yeah, just one other thing to go with that. Make sure you've got a good relationship with your supervisor and your supervisor's peers. Because if your supervisor's like, yeah, that guy is ready to be a manager, and his peers go, I agree, that makes it that much easier. So if you are known to them, that will help a lot.
Yeah.
Really quick, related to that, if you're at a big organization, they probably have an org chart, and on that org chart is a place for you to update your own profile. And so you can go into your own profile and add, here are my work accomplishments, here are everything I've done, here are my successes, here's what I'm interested in, here's my skill sets, and then everybody in the org can see that profile. So if you are looking to climb or move to another area or another arena, another group, that's all there. And then, so I encourage everybody around me, update your profile.
I love that one. All right. Enrique?
Yeah, so how do you think it would be worth, for someone who's not in management at all, do you think it's worth them reading up on or doing some studying on the different personality types that are out there? Because there are different personalities that are motivated by, something intrinsic or something that they can see, can be shown. So what are your thoughts on that, Tobias?
Yeah, I mean, that behooves you in every stage of your life, not only in your job. Get to know personality types. Open your mind to everything that's available to you. But yes.
Thank you.
one thing also on the getting, because you were talking about getting a new gig, find someone inside, even if it's like random on LinkedIn sometimes that helps, because for example, my last 2 gigs, I applied literally for the exact same position externally, and there was someone internally recommending me. I can tell you which one rejected the exact same resume with only an email address difference. Both times it was the inside rec that got me, even though I was qualified for the position, like I hit all the bullet points. External job applications, especially when you're trying to kind of change what you're doing, hiring's a dumpster fire on a good day right now. And it's, I mean, literally when you send just a random external rec, you have to assume that they're gonna look at that for exactly 6 seconds, because that's about the average. So your cover letter is random. They may read it, they may not. They may not like your font. Like, they'll tell you send a personalized resume, but it has to be something our system can ingest, so it should be plain text. Make the contacts, because you never know when random, in my case, my current gig, friend of mine I've known since we were both in the Air Force together, so like 35 years at this point, he happened to go to work for Honeywell in Kansas City. The gig I was at, which was the one I'd also gotten through a rec, I was like, I'm gonna lose my mind if I stay here, it's a clown show. And he's like, find something, I'll give you a rec. So I'd already applied for the same gig externally at Honeywell, just on a lark, and they rejected the one, but his got me an interview where I do reasonably well on. Do not be afraid to leverage it, because internal contacts are gonna work 1,000% better than just sending out resumes. The last time I got a job by a resume, it took so long between sending the resume in and getting the call that I had to look up, I forgot I'd done it. It was like, I think, a year and a half.
Yeah.
So cultivate those connections. They will make your life so much easier, especially if you're trying to move from individual contributor to management.
Absolutely. And well, one more.
Not like a question, but more of a comment for you. I think what you highlighted really well is your failures and your shortcomings. And as a leader, I think you really have to reflect on that, or to be an aspiring leader, I think you really have to reflect on that in order to know where your pitfalls are, to show up in a different way. And I'd say if you have any leaders that have made an impact on you, think hard and long about what they did that made a difference and an impact on you, because you can take that, it's not stealing, and you can apply it and take what you've done and you can apply it and just, I don't know, find someone near you, doesn't matter who, and just have a conversation about it. How do you want to get better? How do you want to improve? And see what comes of it.
Excellent. All right. I do have to fulfill my commitment. So thank you, everyone. I'm supposed to put it over here. So if you don't remember anything else from this talk, I want you to remember these 3 things. Listening is your most important job. It will enable you to better understand your people's needs. It lets others know that you care and are truly invested in their success, and will help you identify problems before they become problems. Delegate the best work. Your success is not judged by your output, but by the output of your team. Give them the opportunity to deliver great solutions and be there by their sides to knock down the obstacles, protect their time, and get them across the finish line. Create a team of leaders. Encourage your people to continue their education, learn new skills, and empower them to make decisions and lead their own groups and projects. Y'all were fantastic. The conversation there, way better than I expected. Thank you so much, everyone. I owe a couple of you guys some fidgets if you're, neurodiverse like me. Thanks for coming. Enjoy the rest of the thing. Please feel free to leave the feedback too, by the way. Thank you so much. I love learning.